Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sam, and I'm here today to talk to you all about pollinators and Pollinator Week. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm broadcasting to you from today. You're here in Melbourne, Victoria, the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to acknowledge their elders past, present, and emerging as well too, and pay my respects to them. Now, today we are going to be talking about Pollinator Week. We're going to be having a look at some of our junior Landcare activity resources around Pollinator Week. We're also really keen to get your ideas and feedback as well too, as educators, about how you would approach something like Pollinator Week. So in the chat on the Landcare page, you're able to type in comments, questions, and everything, and any ideas that you might have there as well too, because we're really keen to get your ideas and feedback. Normally I'm a teacher, and I've got a class of people in front of me, or even online I've got people able to ask questions and make comments as well too. I do really appreciate them as well too, rather than just me talking at a screen. So if you have any questions and comments and that kind of thing, that would be absolutely fantastic. My name is Sam. I am an educator. I'm a science teacher. I run Labcoat Learning. I also do a lot of work with Landcare Australia and the junior Landcare team, looking at the education program, looking at the resources, and looking at how we can improve them and better engage with educators as well too. So if you are an educator, we'd love to know the context in which that you're coming to us from, whether it's early years or primary school or the more senior year levels as well too. So if you don't mind, in junior Landcare, just typing in where you're from and what sort of educational setting you're in, that would be absolutely fantastic. So the format of today is that we're going to be finding out about pollinators, the evolutionary design of pollinators and how plants and pollinators have co-evolved with each other. We're going to be having a look at some butterflies, some real ones, some bees as well too. Again, some real ones. I've got a bit of a pollinator quiz for you as well. We're going to see which of these foods in front of me here are pollinated by insects, as well as a few other things. We're going to have a look at a flower. We're going to look at the parts of a flower, and we're going to find a little bit more about how we can run some pollinator-centric activities in your school as well too, or educational setting, or wherever you're coming to us from. Pollinator Week, by the way, 13th of November. All right, so why do we have Pollinator Week in spring? The question is, well, answered by the same question as well too. We have Pollinator Week in spring because that's when, at least for our temperate states, most things are flowering. And when we have all these plants out and flowering, that attracts all of our pollinators, and people start to notice our pollinators a little bit more. Now, I've said pollinators about 30,000 times already, and I'll continue to say that, and I'm saying very broadly about pollinators today. So we're not just focusing on bees, we're thinking about wasps, some types, not all, some types of butterflies, bees, even some types of flies are pollinators. There's so many different things out there that can be pollinators. And plants have, over millions and millions of years, have co-evolved with pollinators. So I have a selection of foods in front of me over here. I've got an apple, I've got some corn, I've got a carrot, I've got a few other things as well too. Now, just while I'm going through these, I want you to be having a think about which two things here could be the odd one out. So two of these things I'm going to show you are not pollinated by insects. And specifically, we're going to be looking at insect pollinators today. There's quite a few birds that are pollinators, some bats that are pollinators, but we're really specifically looking at insects today as well too. So I'm going to show you 6 things, and if you're on junior Landcare, if you can type in on that, that would be absolutely fantastic. I've got some chocolate as well too. I have a banana, and finally I have a cucumber. Now, I can't see what you're typing into Landcare there, but I do have a friend on the other side of the screen, Alexia, and Alexia is going to be having a look at what you're typing in there. He's got a chat function with me, and he'll be typing stuff into the chat function just to bring your feedback to me as well too. So have a bit of a think, see if you can guess which the odd ones out here. I'll go through them again for you. I have a cucumber, a banana, a carrot, chocolate, some sweet corn, and an apple. So just have a bit of a think about which of those two things could be the odd one out there. Now, some of these things that I'm bringing to you today are activities that I use when I'm teaching my classes about pollen and pollination, and you're most welcome to steal any of these ideas that I'm bringing to you today and use them in your educational settings as well too. So just while Alexi's collating any of those responses that we've got there, I'm going to go and have a little bit of a look at the features of our pollinators. In fact, I'm going to do a bit of a dress up. So a lot of our pollinators, they have antennae. So antennae are a feature of our insects, and our pollinators do often have antennae. So I've got my antennae on over here. When we're looking at our insects as well too, they often have compound eyes. So compound eyes are lots and lots of little eyeballs in the one eye. Now, just to explain to you how it would appear if you were to look through compound eyes, I've got this viewer here, and I'm going to put it over my camera. And it breaks up the world into all of these tiny, tiny little pictures. And this is exactly how things like bees and butterflies and wasps, how they see the world. There's lots and lots of little pictures. And what they can do is they can turn their eyes on or off depending on which way they want to look. So just go through those foods again. Corn, apple, cucumber, carrot, chocolate, and banana. Don't be shy. It doesn't matter if you get it wrong. I'd like to know which ones you think could be the odd one out that are not insect pollinators. Now, our animals as well, to our pollinators, they will often have more legs. My legs have got tangled up in my bee smoker over here. Before we start, I did go out to my beehive and I grabbed the frame of bees. So I look forward to showing you Queen Debbie. I do like to name my queens with a little bit of a pun. So I do have Queen Debbie with me here, as well as about 1,000 or so of her her daughters mainly. There's a couple of her sons there, but mainly her daughters. So they do have more legs as well, our insects. Often they will have bright colours, and bright colours, when we see them in a bee, for example, it's what we call a posimatic coloration. They're warning colours saying, go away. If you get too close, I might have a bit of a sting there, or I can see some things that come through the chat. I'll get to that in just a second. Often our pollinators might live in a house or a colony of some description. This is a paper wasp nest. There's various types of wasps. Some of them are pollinators, some of them are not. But when we think about animals that live in a structure, we've got our bees. Some of them can be solitary, some of them could be communal as well. So depending on where you are viewing us from in Australia, you might have some of our stingless native bees that live in colonies, or down south in Victoria, a lot of our native bees are very much a solitary bee. They're loners. All right. One of the most important features that our pollinators do have, though, is a fluffy body. Unfortunately, I'm very bald, so I don't have a very fluffy body, hairy body at all on my head. The rest of my arms would be quite good being a pollinator. And I'll get to how the pollinator moves in just a second. But one of the other parts of their body that they do have, which is quite an important feature for them, is a proboscis. So things like a fly will have a proboscis, a bee will have a proboscis. Now butterflies have a proboscis. Now the best way for me to demonstrate this to you is through my party blower. Now the proboscis, what they do is they use their proboscis to get really deep down in the flower, because really deep down in the flower, that's where that little drink of nectar is. I want to make the distinction between the nectar and the pollen. The nectar is the juice down the very bottom of the flower. In fact, with this particular flower here, I love these ones because you can see how it goes all the way down the bottom. It's just a little bit of a well right down here. And if I'm careful and snap this bit off, and I'll hold this up here and I'll squeeze it out, hopefully we'll see a little drop of nectar. There it is, right there. There's a little drop of nectar right there, right at the base. And that's that little bit of encouragement for those butterflies, bees, other animals to reach in and get that drink out. So the nectar in a flower is the reward for the pollinator to come and visit. Now I can see a few messages on chat down there, so I'm just going to have a little bit. Karen and Joe think it's a carrot, could be the odd one out. Francis says a cucumber. Vanessa says chocolate, maybe. A lot of people are saying corn. All right. Thank you very much for those, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for suggesting that the corn was the odd one out. You're right, the corn is one of the odd ones out. And the reason why the corn is an odd one out is because it's wind pollinated rather than insect pollinated. So when you see these long fluffy bits on the end of the corn here, what they are, they're part of the female part of the flower to bring in the pollen. And once the pollen is brought into the ovaries or the girl parts of the flower, then it creates the corn that we're familiar with down there. So you've got the corn part, which is the female part of the flower, on our big corn plant, and right at the top we've got the male part of the flower, and that's the bit that the male pollen will fall down onto these little bits, these sticky bits, get drawn into the female part of the flower, and that makes the corn. All right, some people suggested that chocolate could be the odd one out. That was a bit of a trick one, sorry to say. The chocolate is actually, well, the cocoa bean is actually pollinated by a really tiny little, it's called a midge. This is in fact a non-biting midge from memory, but it is in the same family of the sandflies, the Ceratopogidinae. And these ones are a tiny little midge in the rainforests where the cocoa bean is grown. So that is, the cocoa bean is actually pollinated by an insect. A few people suggested carrot. Carrot was a bit of a trick one too, because even though the root of the plant grows underground, it will send out the leaves and the flower stalk from above, very similar to things like a parsley. And the bees absolutely love these flowers, and it needs insects to pollinate from one to the other as well. Bananas, bit of a trick one. The bananas is the other one that isn't pollinated by insects. We've cultivated bananas over a really long period of time, so that they're now kind of not needing the pollination that they once had. The wild banana plant is actually pollinated by bats, but it's been cultivated to such an extent now that it doesn't actually need that pollination anymore. Thank you so much for your suggestions, everybody. I really do appreciate your ideas and your feedback there as well too. So let's have, I'm going to take some of these bits of costume off me, otherwise I'm going to get stuck with them the whole day. What I want to do is I want to have a little look at a flower, the structure of a flower, and talk about how pollination actually works, because depending on the year level that you're working with, the age of the children that you're working with, these young learners can really get into the idea of pollen moving from one part of the flower or moving from one flower to another. One of the features that I didn't put on myself then when I still got my antennas on, one of the features that I didn't put on was wings. Now, often our pollinators have wings as well too. And the reason why they have wings is very simple. Well, there's two reasons. One reason is that they can fly off to another place to lay their eggs, which makes it heaps easier to distribute their young. But the other reason is it saves a lot of time and energy when you're going from one flower to another. So you don't have to climb all the way down, walk across the ground, climb all the way back up to the other one. So with this particular flower here, if I was a bee or butterfly or other animal, I'd reach in with my proboscis to try and get the nectar out there. But often they have, like I said, quite a fluffy body. And as they reach in, they get the pollen stuck to their, something's been in this flower already. I'll go to the next one. Often they'll get the pollen stuck to their bodies. Ah, that's much better. You can see a whole heap of pollen has just got stuck to my finger there. Now, as it goes to the next flower, it rubs that pollen on the other parts of on the flower. So if we're going to go even more detailing, we can go that, yes, there are male and female parts of the flower. So really, when there's lots of flowers, it's just plants, birds and bees. We have the male and the female part of the flower. So the female part of the flower, in this particular one, it's called a desert rose. You'll see it right in the middle there. So this one here is called the stigma. So the stigma is right at in the very center there, and the stigma leads down to the ovary and the ovules, which are right underneath, hidden by the petals there. Now, around the outside of it, we have the male parts of the flower, and the male parts is the anther. And what plants need to do is they need to get pollen from another flower, from another plant, to this one. So they make themselves all nice and showy. That's why they have these petals, which the colours that we see are not always how the insects see it. They often see it in ultraviolet colours. So what we might see as a fairly white coloured flower, like these little thyme flowers here, might almost glow iridescent if we're looking through a bug's eyes. Now, what they're doing is they're advertising with smells. So it's helping their insect is smelling it through its antenna, goes, okay, there's a bit of a feed there. It comes down. It will often have its taste buds on its feet. When we see my butterflies later on, we'll see them stomping up and down on their food, because what they're doing is they're using their feet to taste their food. And as they're reaching with their proboscis, they get the pollen all over themselves and they move it from one flower to another. And as they do that, they brush it from the anthers, the male parts, to the stigma, which is the girl parts of different flowers, and therefore pollination occurs. Without pollination occurring, we wouldn't have the food, because the ovule, which is the bit under where the ovaries are, would not develop. So this cucumber has definitely been fertilized. It's grown. If we didn't have a cucumber that wasn't fertilized, they tend to all just shrivel up and die out. And then they produce seeds, just like in my bean over here. We know that this has been pollinated because when I pull it apart, the seeds are producing, and the seeds are just that ovary that's been fertilized and it's making itself a new bean plant before it all dies off. Now, we need pollinators, and we often refer to bees as being really important pollinators, because so many of our crops, especially with our Western diet, are reliant on bees as the pollinator. So, with Pollinator Week just around the corner, I thought it might be a really nice idea to have a little look at some of the activities that we've got up on the Junior Landcare website. So Alexia is my helper, and Alexia, I'll get you to, if you don't mind, jump into that first one there. You'll find these on the Landcare Australia, under the Junior Landcare tab, under the Learning Centre. We've got a whole heap of different activities, and they cover things like biodiversity, food production and waste. Often they'll have videos there as well too. We feel a lot of videos with Costa, and he's got this great rapport with the kids, and a really nice way of explaining things in really accessible terms as well too. Now, on the Junior Landcare website, what we're trying to do is look at the E5 model, which is engage, explore, evaluate, all those really inquiry-based topics and we do it through various steps. So we have step 1, step 2, step 3. Now, this particular one that we're looking at now is all about pollinators and the roles of insects. The activity that we're suggesting for this is to go out into the garden with the children that you're working with and do some slow looking. Now, slow looking involves just taking that time to sit and watch, do a little bit of collecting, but really just take that time in the environment as well too, and to communicate your findings. So it's drawing what you see. So with our different activities at the top of the page, we've got an activity sheet. So in this particular case, it's an observation sheet. And when you click in the activity sheet, you'll be able to download that observation sheet and use it with your children. Now, we understand that we've, a lot of educators, we work with educators from a really broad range of backgrounds that teach a really broad range of children as well too. So we've given some suggested age ranges. This in particular one is the early years up to about 7 years old. So we've made it for that. But as educators, we like to, I know that I do this, I'm sure that you do this as well too. You'll take an idea and you can adapt it as well too. We try and keep it as open-ended for you as an educator as possible as well. All of these activities are linked to the national curriculum as well too. So down at the very bottom of the page, we do indicate which curriculum standards it covers, and it's obviously there's a fairly heavy weighting on things like science, but we've also got other cross-curriculum priorities like sustainability as well too, as well as some references and further further reading and other resources that you can also undertake. The next activity that I'd like to show you is about our beneficial garden conducting an investigation. So this particular one is made for children a little bit older. It's that 7 to 13 or so age group, so that primary school cohort in particular. And what we're hoping that children will do by looking at the bugs that they find in the garden or outside. A lot of our activities, we're really trying to get kids outside so the kids are engaging with their natural surrounds. And the idea about this is to look at where these animals, where they might actually have a role to play. We're specifically looking at insects in this one, but we're hoping that with the way the activity rolls out, that you'll be able to indicate to the children that something could be a predator, so things like a praying mantis and maybe a hoverfly larvae, they're all predators. But look at the difference between those predators that we find in the garden and understanding that they can be very beneficial for the garden as well too, but also investigating the pollinators and the roles in particular that they play in the garden. When you see that little that picture of the flowers on the screen there just under step 1, I just want to draw attention to those bugs there. The bigger ones, that small one's a small a native bee. The other one though is called the hoverfly. And they're an amazing creature actually. They look a little bit like a bee just with the stripes on their body. So they're in many ways mimicking how a bee's aposematic coloration warns predators. But these are totally harmless to pick up. They look like a little bee and they're a great pollinator. Interestingly enough, the early part of their lives, they're actually a predator. So their larvae, the hoverfly larvae, will actually eat aphids and other garden pests as well too. So to be able to talk to the children that you teach about the different roles that these animals have is amazing. And to open up the children's eyes that it's more than just pollination, that things can have different roles at different stages of their life cycles as well too. So we do have some identification and resources listed throughout our things that we got. I just came lost for words then. Our activities. And the reason why we've got those is so that you can take the children and those ones that are really particularly interested as well too, and go that little bit further and extend them as well. The next one that I'd like to have a look at, Alexia, is our native bees. And I've got a picture of some native bees that I'll show in a second after we've gone through these different activities. But our native bees, our European honeybees get most of the press. It's pretty sad actually, because they're the ones that people know about, they're the ones that people see. But in Australia, we've got over 2,000 different types of native bees. And our native bees are important for not just the native plants that are out there, but they do cross over and pollinate some of our foodstuffs as well too, especially foodstuffs that have originated in Australia. For example, macadamia nuts. Macadamia nuts originated in Australia. And one of the most efficient pollinators for macadamia nuts are the stingless native bees. That's the communal, or often known as the sugar bag native bees. So we've got all of these native bees, and the way that we can help our native bees is by helping to create some habitat for them. And this activity sheet is about doing that background research, understanding that we do have native bees, and how we can link children up with environmental groups, Landcare groups, and other experts as well too, to find out a little bit more about native bees, as well as some resources for native bees as well too, when you are looking for bees in the garden. Alexia, you'll just go for that last one as well too, when you can. Now this is all about creating a bee hotel. So this is more of an action project. And when we're creating a bee hotel, it's looking at what we can actually do on ground. And we've got a great video with Costa there as well too, explaining how to actually go about making a bee hotel and some of the background ideas about why our little reed bees will be able to use these little bamboos and other bits that we have in there as well. Thanks very much for that, Lacey. I'll show you this picture now of what I've got here. This is my picture of the native bees of Victoria. Now, this is very much Victorian-centric. I understand you're probably coming to me from all around Australia, but we here are really lucky that we have so many different bees that I guess nobody knows about. And now into summer is a really great time of year when we do have so many flowers flowering. We have the pollinators building up in their numbers, that we can do a bit of an investigation on the different native bees that are out there. The best resources to look for native bees is on a lot of the museum websites. They do have some really good resources there, and those resources are listed under the Junior Landcare activities there as well too. So one of my favourite ones is this guy over here. It's the blue-banded bee, and they're pretty common in Melbourne where I am. Now the blue-banded bee we'll see from about this time of year right and through till February, and they're hover pollinators, so they hover in front of the flower and they use their buzzing to dust from pollen from their body off into the flower and from one flower to another. They also do collect a bit of pollen nectar and take it back, and they actually live underground as well too. Now, our bees, the ones that we know about are this one. It's the European honeybee, and I have a few here as well too to show you. We're going to have a little look at, and I'm keen to get some feedback from you really soon about how you plan for your activities and plan for resources. So if we do have Pollinator Week coming up, how you would look at looking at accessing resources for Pollinator Week. So I will be asking some of those questions pretty soon. Before I do that though, I would like to show you Debbie and some of her, well, mainly daughters here. I'm going to hold it nice and close. I'm going to have a look for young Debbie as well. Well, she's not young actually. She's in her 2nd year, and that's actually part of the problem. Just move my bee smoker out the way. My bees have decided that Debbie, and you'll see her right next to my finger here, she's the one with the white dot on her back. She's got a surrounder of all these bees that are around her that are sort of tickling her with their antennae. They're the helper bees. I'll just get that glare out the way there, that's better. So there's Debbie right there. Now, at this time of year, my bees have decided that she's getting a bit old, and they've decided to make Debbie Mark II and Mark III, and they're about to swarm my hive. So it's, I was going to have a look at my hive tomorrow, and I'm glad I had scheduled time to have a look in my hive. If you do have access to beekeepers, a lot of them are very keen, and a lot of them come from educational backgrounds like me, and a lot of them do like to do some stuff in schools as well too. So making friends with your local beekeepers is a great way of having access to resources coming to your school or educational setting as well too. So this is a frame from my beehive. My beehive has just a massive 24 frames like this in there at the moment. It's gone through winter, quite a wet, cold winter in Melbourne, and because it was a wet, cold winter in Melbourne, their numbers were down to about 30,000 bees, which sounds like a lot, but it's actually not many, over winter. And now it's 3 boxes high. There's 8 frames in a box, so 24 all up, and there's probably about 60,000 or more bees in my hive. Now, there's not a lot of honey on this frame. Often I get asked, would we use something like this for making honey? Well, the answer is no, because this is what we call a brood frame. So this is where the queen is laying her eggs and the baby bees are growing up. Now, bees go through a metamorphosis, and you'll see that this honeycomb is capped with this sort of brown covering over here. Well, they're the cocoons of the baby bees. So they're all going through their metamorphosis right now. I can show you some pictures of how the larvae develops pretty soon. The queen's over here. She's looking for some spots to lay her eggs, and her attendant bees are just guiding her around at the moment. They feed her, they clean her, they look after her. She's about, like I said, 2 years old now. Most of these other bees, though, aren't anywhere near that old. All our worker bees, they have a lifespan of about 90 days. Now, I find bees absolutely fascinating, and this is how they develop. It starts off just like we saw before with our queen bee over here, and she's laying an egg in that cell there. Now the egg looks a little bit like a jelly bean over here, and each one of these rectangles is 1 day, and this is going to chart the course of this egg over 21 days until it finally hatches out. So there's an egg here, 3 days later from being laid, there's a bit of a blob of jelly. Now this blob of jelly has the baby larvae in there as well too. So bees, and this is the same with all bees, even our native bees, they hatch out from an egg, then we have a little bit of a larvae. And the larvae is like a fly larvae, or a bit of a maggot almost as well. It doesn't sound very nice, but there's a bit of better picture of it over here. It's flipped itself around in the right way. Now, just like with our European honeybees, our native bees go through this process of the larvae growing, and when the larvae is growing, that's when it gets fed nectar and it gets fed pollen as well too. So even though our bees collect pollen and they move that pollen around from flowers, they're also collecting it to take back and feed their young as well. So our larvae is growing up, the cell is capped on its 7th day, and our larvae grows inside and changes, and it goes through its metamorphosis. So on 1 day it's a grub, the next day, bingo, it's sprouted legs. And the process happens extremely fast. The hive is nice and warm. We have even heaps of bees inside the hive to heat it up. What they do is they eat the honey, they disconnect the muscles in their wings and warm up the hive. As the bees grow, it gets its features become more defined until finally our baby bee is ready to emerge 21 days later. So bees, I find it absolutely amazing. They, people are very engaged when we start talking about bees, when we start talking about their life cycles, and I highly recommend, if you can, finding some information about the life cycle of bees. But if you can as well too, mention or highlight the role that our native bees have. We have one species of introduced bee in Australia. We've got two actually. We've got the bumblebee in Tasmania. We've got the honeybee in Victoria and New South Wales. And in Queensland, we've actually just had a recent introduction of an exotic bee. I see something coming through in the chat. I'll just get to that in a second. But we've got over 2,200 species of native bees in Australia. Just get to that chat there. All right, I got that poster from a bee supply shop. It was called Redpaths in Mornington, Parkdale in Victoria. So they're called Redpaths. There's quite a few resources out there. I got this one from the same place as well too. There are many others as well too. Okay, next comment. I'd like to find out more about native species of ladybirds. Do you have any suggestions for finding resources or for identifying, learning about these? All right, the museum websites are the best ones for most species and you can usually get some fairly good taxonomic detail on them. Your next step would be to look at maybe your local Landcare group or friends group, or maybe even your Field Naturalist Club group as well too, which I'm a member of my local Field Naturalist Club group, and we often get people putting up their questions, and there will usually be somebody who just by chance will specialise in that area, and they will have a wealth of knowledge and be really keen to impart that knowledge as well too. What we're going to be doing as well too on the Landcare pages is we're going to be really picking up what we're doing with our junior Landcarer, and I'll be monitoring that, and I'll be putting some posts up on that as well too. So you can post some things up on that, and we'll post it out to on the Landcare community, and we might be able to get some feedback on that as well. So if you have a question about a butterfly you've seen or an insect you've seen, from memory there's quite a few people that are following that page, and so being able to put it up on that Landcare page, we'll be able to get it out there and get a bit of that crowd knowledge coming through as well too. Thanks, Alexi. Alexi's just put it up on the banner to join the junior Landcare topic on the Landcare. Next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my camera into my butterfly tent, but I like to be able to I'm a bit high hyperactive. I like to be able to be feeding the butterflies and talking about the butterflies, and also talking about how we might access resources and that sort of thing, because we would like to have a bit of a professional discussion with you, as well as to talk about pollination and pollinator week and the different top pollinators that are out there, and to showcase and show you the bees and show you our butterflies and that sort of thing. I'd really like to know from a perspective how we can do better, what resources you like to access, where you access it, how you engage with organisations like Landcare or with Landcare, whether there's other organisations that you use as well too. So I've got Alexi's got a few questions that he'll put up in the banner in just a moment. So the first one is, how do you access resources, and how would you plan for something like this, meaning Pollinator Week? Now, we've got a lot of different weeks throughout the year. We've got Pollinator Week, we've got Earth Hour, we've got Clean Up Australia Day. We've got so many really great causes and focal points throughout the year. How do you plan for something like that? So when you're doing your planning at the start of term or start of the year, what do you look for? Do you go into Google? How do you do it? If you could type it into Landcare, that'd be absolutely fantastic. And what we'll do is we're going to be taking notes as we go. Lacey will be feeding that to me in the chat as well, so I'll be able to, if I've got any questions and comments, that I'd love to expand on that as well. But while we're doing that, I'm going to take the camera into the butterfly tent, which I've got conveniently behind me, and I've got it full of monarch butterflies, and we're going to have a look at them, and we're going to have a look at how they go about pollinating as well. So 2 seconds, everybody. I will be back in just a moment. We are still in lockdown here in Victoria, so I am coming to you from my lounge room here. All right. I can see the butterflies have all gone over to the window. The reason why they've all gone over to the window is because they're following the sun. These use the sun to navigate. So that's why they're all over there. I'm just zipping up the tent so we don't have any escapees throughout the house. All right. Now, just while you're typing that in, if you could, that'd be absolutely fantastic. I'm going to get a butterfly. Now, these ones, monarch butterflies, I'll get into a bit of info about them soon. But if you see me hold one or touch one, don't worry, I'm not going to hurt it. They're very, very tough butterflies. They are designed for migrating really, really long distances. And if I touch their wings, it won't break them. And I'm not getting any of their scales on my fingers there. Now, I mentioned before about our insects that they often have their tongues or their taste buds on their feet. These butterflies absolutely do. Now, what they do is they stomp up and down on their food. And when they stomp up and down on their food, they get an idea about whether it's going to be good or not to eat. If they decide that the flower that they're on is going to be good, then they'll unfurl their proboscis and they'll get that drink of nectar. Now, they've got really fluffy bodies, and that pollen will get stuck to their proboscis. It'll also get stuck around their abdomen area and their thorax. And as they move around to different flowers, they'll move that pollen along as well too. Now, what I've got here is a stick with a sponge on it, and what I've done is I just dipped that sponge into some cordial, and it's really strong cordial. And what the butterfly will do, I'm just going to get this one here, you can't see it, but it's a resting butterfly. It's resting with its wings up, so when they're like that with their wings up, it means they're resting. And this one's stomping up and down there. It's pretty happy to be there. Its proboscis is right here, and it's using its proboscis to poke into the sponge. So just that bit there is its proboscis. Now, interestingly enough, these monarch butterflies, they've only got 4 legs that we can see. I promise you that I haven't ripped any off. They've got 6 legs, but they keep their front pair of legs, they're really, really tiny and just curled up almost under their chin there. They don't really use in this particular family of butterflies. We don't perhaps know why, but maybe one day one of the children you teach can work out why for us. I've got a theory. I think it's so that they can get further inside a flower, but I don't know. Oh, something's come through on the chat there. Awesome. Oh, fantastic, Julie. So Julie's from actsforbees.org, and they have many resources, including curriculum, on their website. Thank you very much, Julie. And all right, Madeline would like to know if educators search by climate in the area, by season, by students year, by curriculum outcomes as well too. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So on the Landcare, on the Junior Landcare Activity Centre, what we've done is we've indicated whether it's for a temperate area or a tropical area, but we're very aware as well too that different things happen at different types of year for between temperate and tropical. I'm very much in a temperate area here, and it's obviously we focus a lot of our mini beast stuff around that sort of springtime when we have most mini beasts around the place. But at different times of year, that's really very, very important to be aware of it, depending on where you are and your climate region as well too. So if I hold the butterfly nice and close, you can, it's wanting just, there is this in focus a bit better there now. It's got quite a fluffy body, and that fluffy body is perfect for little grains of pollen to attach to it as it moves from one flower to another. So things like butterflies, they're amazing pollinators and often underrated as well too. Just seen a couple of things come through the chat. All right, so Madeline says when they're planning for the term, they usually use Google and look for video through YouTube. Fantastic. And Kiara is saying you use Cool Australia, and they do have some amazing resources as well too. And you've discovered that through the Environment Education Victoria newsletters and all through things like the Backyard Bird Count. Thank you very much for putting that through. Now, with our butterflies as well too, I'll get to a little bit of the history of these particular butterflies. While I'm doing that though, I would like to know something else, or we would like to know at Junior Landcare something else. And we would like to know is what you've done for a pollination type activity in the past. So what particular activities you might have conducted or run if you've had to run, or not had to, if you've decided to run a pollinator type activity in the past. Or maybe coming along to something like this today is your background research for getting some ideas about what in particular to do. This butterfly here, our monarch butterflies, aren't native to Australia, but interestingly enough, they're not technically introduced either. So they were brought here, not by people, but by storms. In 1870, there were some storms across the Pacific, and they managed to island hop across the Pacific Ocean, across the back of 3 cyclones in 1870. Now, this could have been happening for quite a long time, but we never knew it was happening because what we had at that time in 1870 was the colonists had established their host plant. Now, a great way of helping butterflies and a great way of helping a lot of our other native animals as well too, especially our insects, is to plant the types of plants that they need. So in the case of butterflies, they all have a particular host plant. Unfortunately, these have a weed that's their host plant. It's called milkweed, or sometimes wild cotton is the other name for it, or swan plant is its other name as well too. Now, the colonists had established it because it was good for hat making, amongst other things. It has a really fluffy seed pod. But of course, being a weed, it escaped. And by the time the butterflies had arrived here across the Pacific, it was growing wild around the place. And so they've come all the way here and they're going, oh my goodness, I can actually lay my eggs. And that's how they become established. Now, they got blown up, of course, because they were a migratory butterfly. They were migrating from Canada and Alaska down to Mexico. These are ones where that really famous migration is. And so they got blown off course and they arrived in Australia. So even though they're not native, they're technically not introduced either. And they're probably one of the few species that we've had arrive in Australia in the last 200 years that has not had a demonstrably negative impact on the environment. So their larvae, the caterpillars, they eat the weed. As a butterfly, they're actually not a bad pollinator. So they can go around and doing some pollination as well too. Now, I'm going to try a little bit of a trick with my butterfly here. And there's various companies out there that do supply butterflies for classroom engagement, that sort of thing. I work with a group called Butterfly Adventures, and they do a lot of stuff with butterflies in the classroom. I've got this butterfly to sit on my finger because what I've done is I'm using its features. I'm using its tongues or its taste buds that are on its feet. What I did was I put a little bit of nectar or the liquid from this sponge onto my finger, and very gently got that butterfly to transfer itself onwards. See if this one wants to come on my finger. Nope. What about you? I say don't work with animals or kids, and I've made a career of working with both. So, no, that one doesn't want to do it either. Right, you can go on the sponge. The sponge is much better. Now, what it's done is it's got its taste buds on its feet, and so when I had the nectar on my finger, I was basically tricking it into thinking that it was a flower. Just like to think about what our next lot of questions would be is how you access resources, what other types of organisations do you engage with. We do cover that you looked at Cool Australia as well, so thank you for that. And I guess our next thing as well, when we're coming to you as educators, we would like to know what types of resources and things would you like Junior Landcare to provide? Is it more videos? Is it topic specific stuff like what we're doing now? What would you like us to provide? What expertise or information can we bring to you? See something else is in the chat, so I'll just have a quick look at that. All right, so Kiara's saying that you've done a lot of observation activities for Pollinator Week, brought in honey with honeycomb for the students to try, and some bee pollen to smell as well too. Oh, nice. So this year you're planning on using some cheese dust to represent pollen. That'd be really cool, actually. I haven't seen that one before. I imagine that it would be quite sticky, and it'll get. I'm guessing when you say cheese dust, you might mean the parmesan dust. So it's going to get stuck as they go from one. You could either use the kids' hands or put the dust on the kids or puppets. Yeah, that's a really good one. I like that idea of using the cheese dust to represent the pollen. Fantastic. Jacqueline's saying use rangers on the run in New South Wales, and you receive the butterfly enclosures. Are fantastic. Up close and personal education experience for the 3 to 5 year olds. Great, thanks for that. So if we were to be putting more stuff up on the website, on our Junior Landcare website, in the activity centre, what things would you like to see? Would you like to see more videos, activities, or is it a matter of maybe connecting you to other resources and other organisations as well too? Just while you type in any suggestions there, I'm going to get one of my butterflies back again, because I've got another fact about these monarch butterflies. Oh, I moved it too fast. Now, as the caterpillar eats the milkweed, eats the plant, its host plant, what it does is it absorbs some toxins. So it absorbs a thing called cardiac glycosides. Now, the monarch caterpillars, they're really stripy, really bold caterpillar, and they look absolutely amazing. And the reason why they look so bold and amazing is because, well, they don't need to camouflage themselves. Just like a bee or a wasp has those aposematic bright colorations, so does our caterpillar. So in the case of a bee or wasp, though, it's got a stinger, it's got venom in its stinger. The caterpillar instead has poison. It absorbs those cardiac glycosides in its body, and it stores them in its body. And if something is silly enough to eat it, that animal would get really, really sick and have a very, very bad experience and learn to and never eat one of them again. So it keeps those chemicals in its body even after it's gone through its change, its metamorphosis. Did you notice that I just moved my hand way too quick in front of that butterfly and I thought I was a bird? And it just opened its wings a little bit. But what the adult butterfly does is along the outside of its wing there, it's got this pattern in the dots, and that's where it keeps most of those toxins there. So if a bird is going to chase it, it's most likely to get the edge of the wing and it's going to get that really bad taste and let it go at that point there. A couple more things in chat. All right, Madeline's suggesting that videos like this are great. And this type of video is really engaging as kids love to see the insects. Cool, all right, that's really good to know. We can definitely look into bringing you more of this sort of stuff. Vanessa's saying it made an activity that students make a bee using cork as the body and decorating it with coloured pipe cleaners or paper for wings, sticky jewels, and hung on a fishing line stick. And the idea is to get children to talk about native bees be aware of what they do and what they look like. And Vanessa's also made some A4 laminations of the native bees that you found in your local area as well too. Francis is suggesting that some short and informative videos for preschool age children would be great. And Kiara is saying, love some more interactive type activities, even an online game or videos and links and recommendations for other organisations are always great. That's really good feedback. Thank you for that. And we will be flicking out a little bit of a survey after this as well too, if you don't feel comfortable typing in or you're not able to type it in at the moment, to get some of that feedback from you, because we're wanting to improve the usability of our learning centre and to make it something where educators can get the activities and the information that they need. So the last thing is I'd like to know is, how do you engage with other educators? I find as a primary science teacher that there's not a lot of people like me out there. So I'm always interested in knowing, do you have a network of people that you work with? Do you work with, say, your local Landcare group or local environmental friends group? Because I find when I'm working with other people, I'm exposed to more of those resources as well too. So I'd really love to know about how you engage with other educators out there as well too. I'll just close this chat so I can see what's going on here with my screen. That's better. You'll notice that the butterfly is bending its antennae down a lot here. So basically I've just given this butterfly the time of its life by putting it on this sponge here. And what it's doing is it's trying to get as much information about this amazing lollipop that it's on. It's decided it's full now, so then another one's going to be a bit more cooperative. There we go. And so what you'll notice, this one will start doing, it's bending them down now. It starts to bend its antennae down right now, just so it's able to get as much information about this as it possibly can. I'll go over to front then by moving my finger a bit too fast. So I find when I'm trying to plan activities and that kind of thing, because I'm the only science teacher at my school, I teach 1 day a week in the classroom, as well as do these kind of incursions, and as well as do a few other things and work with Landcare as well too. So it's quite hard, I find, to actually work with other educators when I'm developing a topic around it. I know that other teachers that we often, when we go out to schools, they'll sort of team teach and they'll reuse some activities that they've done in the past. And I find that when I'm working with other people, I'm able to make my activities just so much more rich as well too. Right, just gonna get this one more butterfly. This is a male butterfly, this one. I can tell it's a male butterfly, I'm not gonna get X-rated here. It's got dots on its wings. So this little dot in the middle of its wing there, you can just see a bit of a raised bump in the middle of that vein right there. So that little bump there is actually a scent gland, and these use scent for communicating. So this one is amazing. Monarch butterflies actually patrol up and down their patches of the host plant, the milkweed, and you'll see them take other male monarch butterflies out of the air actually fighting. Some few things in chat there. All right. Oh, that's a great suggestion there, Kiara. Yeah, Resource Smart is great for connecting with other schools. I was lucky enough to be at a school where we were part of the Resource Smart program. We've since moved to a new school, and we're just re-establishing the Resource Smart program. I'm not sure whether Resource Smart is in other states, but in Victoria, it's a really active program, and it's well resourced by Sustainability Victoria as well too, and the various other agencies that they have working out there. Danny said that she went to STEMX Academy and that you have a Facebook group about that. That's good to know that there's those Facebook groups out there, Danny. And Julie suggests the Australian Association of Environmental Education is a great resource and worth joining as well too. And I actually do highly recommend them as well. Well, today, that's, I'm afraid, getting very close to the end of our time, everybody. We've had an amazing experience bringing this to you. Thank you so much for coming along. We do promise a PD certificate, and if you would like a PD certificate, send an email to joe stentiford@landcareaustralia.com.au. That should come up in your banner right there, and we'll email one out to you for your time, for your feedback as well too, because it's not just learning about the pollination and pollinators today, it's also about having this professional discussion as well too, and starting out that conversation and networking as well. So we would like to cover all of that in that PD. So I'd like to say thank you very much for having me along. I'd like to say thank you very much for Landcare Australia for having me as part of the Junior Landcare program. It's the privilege of working in the Learning Centre and to help to develop some of the resources and to be able to bring these animals to you today and have this discussion with you as well too. So everyone, Pollinator Week is coming up very, very soon. We hope that in your part of the world, you will be able to do something about Pollinator Week. I'm really actually keen to find out if you're in a more tropical part of Australia, what Pollinator Week would look like up there, because I know that you're about to get those storms and the rainy part of the season, and up there maybe Pollinator Week might not quite be as relevant as it is down here, where we've got all of our orchids flowering and all of our blossoms flowering and everything's happening down here. So I'd be kind of keen to find that out. Keep your eye on the Landcare pages as well too, and we'll be putting up some information, and you'll be seeing me doing some comments, adding some photos there as well too, and to join the Junior Landcare topic. So everyone, thank you so much for your time. We hope that you've enjoyed it. We'd love to hear your feedback about how today went as well too. So when you're emailing Joe to get your certificate, if you could give us some feedback about today of whether it met your expectations, what more we could do if we ran something like this next time, or some suggestions for other things that you would like us to run a bit of an expert topic on. No, I'm saying an expert, I'm an educator, but I just happen to work with some of these creatures a little bit more than others. If you'd like to make some suggestions or give us some feedback about how today went, when you email Joe, even if you don't want a certificate, if you could just email Joe and let us know what you're thinking to joe.stenderford@landcareaustralia.com.au, that would be fantastic. Thanks so much, everybody. We've really enjoyed bringing this to you today, and we hope to hear from you sometime soon. Thanks. Bye.